Good morning to everybody. I was invited to make an introduction to today's session on what to do with environmental and sustainable governance. I'm glad to do so. As a starting point, I would like to use the quote from the summary of the ministerial discussions in Rio de Janeiro in late 2007 that the status quo is not an option. I would complement this phrase by indicating the status quo is an important and significant achievement, but it is not an option for the future. I will organize my introduction into three main parts. First, I would like to address briefly what governance and international environmental governance is. Secondly, I would like to talk on the need to strengthen international environmental governance, both institutionally and non-institutionally. And lastly, I would also like briefly to address on the possibility, on the process, how such a strengthening of IEG could happen. Let me begin with a definition of governance. Governance can be defined as the system how actors through institutions and processes identify, address and solve common problems. International environmental governance would thus be the political and administrative system established to address international environmental problems. I think it is very important to make a distinction between international environmental governance and sustainable development governance. Sustainable development governance embraces all three pillars of sustainable development. It means environment, economic and trade, and development, social aspects. The need for strengthened international environmental governance is crucial because only by protecting and ensuring a sustainable use of the natural resource base of our life, we can also make sure that development, social, economic development can happen not only now but also in the future. So there is a crucial need to have a strong international environmental governance pillar that is able to influence and stimulate the other pillars of sustainable development. Only if three strong pillars are able to work together are we able to achieve sustainable development over our common ultimate goal. In this context, it's also very important to underline that by replacing the term environment by sustainability, we do not help the process. Just by starting to talk about sustainable development governance instead of environmental governance, we are, rather than strengthening the environmental concerns and the environmental pillars, diluting this pillar. Our goal should not be to relativize the environmental concerns, but to strengthen them and to have a strong governance system able to bring these interests into the other pillars. Let me make a short overview over the emergence of international environmental governance. First, international environmental treaties have been concluded in the 18th and 19th century. But these treaties dealing with rivers, with wildlife, were ad hoc solutions with a very limited scope. They had a limited subject matter, were covering a limited region, and were providing limited measures. This ad hoc approach was gradually evolving into a more comprehensive approach. Since the 1960s, considerable international efforts have been undertaken to protect the environment. Today, we have more than 500 MEAs, more than 300 have been concluded since 1972. Today, we have so many actors in the field of international environmental governance. On the one side, there has been an evolution from states to non-state actors. The early regime has included mainly the states. Today, non-state actors have become important players in international policies and also in international environmental policies. There is an abundance of institutions, UNEP, multilateral environmental agreements, the CHEF, the CSD. There are so many institutions that it's sometimes difficult to keep track of all the actors involved. If you look at the broad system of international environmental governance, a number of actors can be identified and clustered together. A simplified overview of all the actors involved in international governance could look like this. It shows that there have been a number of world summits. There are specialized agencies, functional commissions and other UN bodies. There are research and training institutes, programs and funds such as the United Nations Environment Programme or UNDP. And there's an abundance of international environmental agreements which can be grouped together into a climate change sector, into a cluster dealing with biodiversity, and a cluster dealing with chemicals and wastes. This illustration provides a simplified overview over the complex system that involves so many international institutions and actors involved in environmental policy making and environmental policy implementation. At first glance, the reaction could be, this is a success. It's a tremendous success to have been able to build over more or less 40 years such a rich and strong regime. However, environmental challenges are more pressing than ever. Climate change, the loss of ecosystems and biological diversity, water and forests, chemicals and wastes are just some areas where the pressure on the environment is still too big. I would like to quote Kofi Annan from his report In Larger Freedom, where he held that all our efforts to defeat poverty and pursue sustainable development will be in vain if environmental degradation and natural resource depletion continues unabated. This shows clearly that international environmental governance needs to be strengthened in order to be able to make a contribution to sustainable development that is needed to ensure that all three pillars can advance in a complementary manner. Let us now, after this look over the historic emergence of international environmental governance, look at the challenges and shortcomings that today's international regime is facing. As indicated, the international environmental regime grew as a result of urgent problems, not in an overarching vision, but on an ad hoc manner. This has brought about several institutional shortcomings. First, fragmentation and dilution. Dilution meaning that it isn't clear anymore which institution has what core responsibility and authority. The second cluster of shortcomings are the overlaps, duplications, inconsistencies, the lack of coherences and the gaps. Then there's a lack of common orientation of the players involved. Fourthly, there is an inadequate institutional authority and leadership within international governance. The authority, the membership, the financial resources and the location of the different institutions are not sufficient to provide overarching guidance. And finally, there is an imbalance between the environmental pillar on the one side and the other regimes on the other side. The environmental regime has weak obligations, it has limited resources, it has weak compliance mechanisms, and it does not have an effective dispute settlement mechanisms. These challenges are complemented by insufficiencies concerning the visibility of environmental issues, the pressure in favor of environmental issues, and a wrong prioritization. Therefore, there is a clear need for strengthening international environmental governance institutions. There is a need for a comprehensive, coherent, effective and efficient regime. I think this double C, double E approach is crucial. We need a regime that is comprehensive, that is tackling all areas where we need environmental policies. We need a regime that is coherent, a regime that does not have overlaps and contradiction itself, but where each actor is supporting each other in a mutually supportive manner. We need a regime that is effective, so the measures and the policies developed must have an effect on the ground. And finally, we need a regime that is efficient. That means that we are able to achieve our objectives with the less costs possible. If we look at the different challenges outlined before, there's a set of measures needed that we have to formulate and implement. In order to achieve such a comprehensive, coherent, effective and efficient regime, we have to tackle the challenges identified before. To address fragmentation and dilution, we need to develop a strong central pillar with political and institutional authority and the resources needed to fulfill its most important political and normative role. In order to tackle fragmentation and dilution, we also have to strengthen coherence, coordination and synergies through, for example, a clustering approach. I think chemicals and waste is a showcase example of what we have to do also in other areas. In the year 2002, in Cartagena, the international environment minister have agreed upon a comprehensive package of measures to strengthen international environmental governance. One key element was the call for strengthening synergies and cooperation within clusters such as the chemical clusters. Based on that, Switzerland has offered to host all three conventions of this regime in Geneva. The international community has today decided to cluster them together in Geneva and to allow them to work closely together from a geographic perspective. In 2006, Switzerland, together with Norway, has argued that moving the three conventions together in the same building is not sufficient. We also need more synergies in the managerial level. Within the secretariats, we might need a joint head of the three secretariats. We have to bring the secretariats not only geographically, but also from a management perspective closer together. Based on this proposal, a joint ad hoc working group was established by the three conventions, which has negotiated a comprehensive package of measures to strengthen coherence and coordination within the chemicals and waste cluster. All three conventions have adopted that comprehensive package, and next year, in February 2010, we will have, as a premier in international and politics, a joint meeting of all three COPs of the three conventions. Other challenges of the current regime are the gaps. In order to address this problem, we need to ensure that all major players ratify the relevant international instrument, that these instruments are implemented, and that further frameworks will be developed in order to make sure that issues like forests or water, for example, or new chemicals will be tackled by the international community. In order to address the challenge of the imbalance with other regimes, we need clearer commitments. The commitments within the national environmental regime have to be formulated in a more specific and clear manner. We need more resources, and we need stronger and more effective mechanisms to support, catalyze, and also ensure compliance and implementation. A number of efforts have been undertaken so far to strengthen international environmental governance. Interesting, all these efforts so far have focused on institutional aspects. We think we need strong institutions to ensure that global environmental governance can fulfill its purpose. But strong institutions are not sufficient. We also need clear common goals and common commitments. Today's international environmental governance regime can be described as an abundance of institutions, each institution formulating its own objectives and policies. This situation is creating challenges. I think the environmental pillar has to learn from the development pillar. The development pillar has faced similar challenges in the past, and it has succeeded in formulating a set of Millennium Development Goals. This set of Millennium Development Goals provides overarching guidance and orientation in areas like eradicating extreme poverty, to achieve universal primary education, promote gender equality and empower women, reduce child mortality, improve maternal health, combat HIV, AIDS, malaria and other diseases, ensure environmental sustainability, and to promote a global partnership for development. The MDGs are a success story, I would argue. I agree with those who say that we are far away from ensuring that the MDGs will be realized, but they have helped and triggered a lot of activities. They have proven to be an extremely useful tool, as they have helped to unite and provide common orientation for the main international and national actors behind the key commitments and provide a common orientation. They have raised awareness and visibility for development issues. They have revitalized the development agenda and UNDP's mandate. They have generated new means of implementation and they have improved tracking of progress and accountability. I would argue that we need similar global environmental goals as we have Millennium Development Goals. If we would have a set of global environmental goals, today's regime of international environmental actors would not look anymore with each institution having its own set of orientations and goals, but it would be able to streamline the different goals and to make sure that all the institutions are working together in a mutually supportive manner to make sure that these overarching global environmental objectives will be achieved. These GECs, these global environmental goals, do not have to be negotiated new. They can be based on agreed goals and targets. We have adopted over the last 20 years so many specific goals and targets in different areas. With regard to biodiversity, the ministers have agreed to achieve a significant reduction on the current rate of loss on the Earth biodiversity. With regard to climate change, we have agreed to achieve stabilization of greenhouse gas concentration in the atmosphere at the level that prevents dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate system. In the area of chemicals, we have agreed to achieve by 2020 that chemicals are used and produced in ways that lead to the minimization of significant adverse effects on human health and environment. And with regard to water, for example, we have agreed to develop integrated water resource management and water efficiency plans. There are many more internationally agreed goals and targets, and we should try to bring them together and to bring them in a system that highlights 6 or 8 overarching global environment goals. These goals could be complemented by specific targets and by indicators that will help to monitor progress in the implementation. I think it is clear what is needed. We have now to engage in a process that will be able to deliver solutions in order to address these needs. Let me first look briefly back. In 1972, in Stockholm, one of the big outcomes has been the establishment of UNEP. 20 years later in Rio, one of the big successes was the establishment of the CSD. 10 years later, in Johannesburg, we had agreed on a reform of the CSD and its working modalities. I believe that we should use a possible Stockholm plus 40 or Rio plus 20 summit in order to ensure a reform and strengthening of international environmental governance. International environmental governance has to be strengthened as a crucial pillar within the overarching sustainable development governance. We have to make sure that this strengthening is taking place institutionally and politically. We have to make sure that we know the overarching main global environmental goals and that the means and resources will be available to achieve these goals. It will be crucial to ensure that international environmental governance will be able to live up to its responsibility, and therefore we need to be able to develop concrete, ambitious proposals. I hope that this process will not lead towards negotiations of the common lowest denominator, but that the international community will be able to come together and to find together the concrete responses needed to address the challenges. I believe that the process towards a possible Stockholm plus 40 or Rio plus 20 summit could provide the framework for developing the concrete measures and responses needed to address the challenges identified before. Thereby, UNEP, as a central pillar of international environmental governance with a clear normative and political function, should take the lead. The Belgrade process that has been initiated at the last UNEP Governing Council will be crucial for that. And the formula adopted by this process, that form should follow function, is, I think, the right approach. We have at this stage to focus on the functions and look at forms later. Crucial functions that will have to be fulfilled by international environmental governance can be clustered into 3 areas. First, the scientific area. It is a crucial function to provide the scientific information needed to develop the correct policies. Secondly, the policy and normative function. The international environmental governance has to be able to develop the political and normative framework and the policies needed to address the problems identified by the first function. And thirdly, the international environmental governance system should be able to catalyze the support and to support the implementation that is needed. Policies are only as good as their implementation. Form has to follow function. Therefore, it is crucial that we achieve an agreement on the different functions of a strengthened international environmental governance system. It is wrong to focus our attention now on the institutions, on the institutional status of the different actors. We have to understand the challenges, to agree on the functions, and to develop together the responses needed to make sure that international environmental governance will be able to fulfill its functions. We are embarking on a process towards a new World Summit, and UNEP has launched a process to develop a better understanding of the challenges of the current system and to develop options to address them. I think we should use the momentum of these two processes. We should use the momentum of a new World Summit to make sure that we are able to develop and adopt the very concrete measures that are needed to make sure that the international system will be able to protect and promote the sustainable use of the natural resources.